Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's story. We're so glad to have you here. We hope that this story will bring you moments of reflection, warmth, and inspiration. Thank you for joining us now. Let's dive into the story and discover the beautiful bond that waits ahead. Under the faint early morning sunlight blanketing the Serengeti savannah, Ranger Jonas drove his jeep slowly along the winding trails. It seemed like an ordinary, peaceful morning, but then amid the soft breeze and forest bird song, a strange sound pierced the calm. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't the call of a flock. It was crying. Faint, hoarse, as if rising from deep within the tall grass. Jonas immediately stopped the vehicle. His heart beat faster, a powerful intuition rising from within his chest. He didn't hesitate. With years of experience in the field, he knew this sound was not normal. Carefully, he stepped out, grabbed his binoculars, and moved cautiously toward the source of the sound. The closer he got, the clearer the cries became, now mixed with the sound of heavy breathing as though a large animal was present. Jonas gently parted the grass, taller than a man, his eyes wide open. And then the sight before him froze him in place. Amid a shallow patch hidden within the tall grass, a baby no more than a few months old lay curled up on the dry earth. Her cheeks flushed red, her sunburnt skin glowing, her cry hoarse as though she had been crying for hours. But what stunned Jonas into silence wasn't the presence of a baby in the deep wild. It was the fully grown lioness, sitting less than a meter away. She didn't growl, didn't pounce, and showed no signs of aggression. Her fur was soaked in early morning dew, and her amber eyes stared quietly at the infant, as if guarding it. Jonas stood motionless, hardly daring to breathe. But then the lioness gave him a gentle glance and lay down, turning her face away, exposing the child as if to say, "I've kept her safe. Now it's your turn." Jonas's heart clenched. A story no one had ever told was beginning, and he knew that day would change everything. He held his position, his hand hovering near the tranquilizer gun on his belt, but he didn't draw it. Every muscle in his body was taut like a stretched wire. In all his years as a ranger, he had faced starving leopards, raging elephants, and entire prides of lions at night, but never had he witnessed a sight like this. The lioness showed no signs of aggression. She lay on her side, her head resting on her front paws, eyes still watching the baby like a silent guardian. Her sand-colored fur was dusty and matted, looking as if she had just endured a long and exhausting journey. Jonas blinked several times, trying to steady himself. He took a step back, then crouched, lowering himself to the lioness's eye level to avoid provoking her. The look in her eyes pierced him, not fierce, not defensive, but calm, almost compassionate, as if she understood that tiny life needed protecting, and now she was passing that responsibility on to him. The baby's cries grew weaker by the minute. The small body curled tighter, lips cracked, skin pale beneath streaks of dirt. Jonas knew she was severely dehydrated and might slip into hypothermia if not cared for soon. His chest tightened. Gently, Jonas pulled a thin blanket and a small bottle of water from his backpack. His eyes never left the lioness. He knew that even one wrong move could change everything. But strangely, the lioness merely lifted her head slightly, then lowered it again, as if she was watching but also slowly retreating. Jonas crawled slowly toward the child and laid the blanket over the trembling little body. As his hand touched her, the crying stopped for a moment. The baby's tiny eyes opened, wet and blurry, filled with both fear and hope. Jonas touched her forehead with one finger and whispered, "It's okay now. I'm here." The lioness didn't move, but in that moment he felt something pass between silent exchange that transcended instinct and fear, leaving only trust. And Jonas understood this wasn't just a rescue mission. It was something sacred, a destined meeting in the heart of the wild. With the sharp instincts of a seasoned ranger, Jonas scanned the area. Just a few steps around the grassy clearing, the truth began to emerge beneath the morning mist that had yet to fully lift. The grass had been trampled in uneven patches, clear signs of a nighttime chase. Small round paw prints clustered together, the unmistakable tracks of hyenas. Jonas crouched. Gently parting a layer of grass there was a streak of blood, dark red and half-dried. Not much, but enough to confirm that a battle had taken place. He looked up, eyes settling on the lioness lying just a few meters away. On her shoulder was a deep gash, bleeding slowly. Her already matted fur was now further stained with dried blood and dirt. Jonas held his breath. The truth revealed itself like a painting. Last night, a pack of hyenas had surrounded this spot, and it was this lioness who had stood against them. Not for territory, not for pride, but for a human chilled creature, entirely foreign, fragile, and vulnerable. Jonas felt a lump form in his throat. He looked down at the baby, curled beneath the blanket, its breathing faint. Then his gaze shifted back to the lioness now, like a warrior exhausted after her final battle. A question rose in his mind, one he couldn't shake. Why? Why would a predator born of instinct and shaped by brutal laws choose to protect rather than abandon or attack? He had no answer, but in the lioness's deep, weary eyes, Jonas saw something that rose above instinct: grace, courage, and a wordless, reasonless compassion. He tightened his arms gently around the child and whispered to himself, "You did what no one thought possible. You kept her alive till dawn." And, in the soft sunlight that had just crested the horizon, Jonas knew he had just witnessed a miracle in the heart of the wild. Jonas gently knelt, both hands wrapping protectively around the trembling little body beneath the thin blanket. The baby was caked in mud, cheeks pale, lips dry and cracked. But she was still breathing faint, fragile as a thread, yet undeniably alive. He placed a hand on her forehead. Her body temperature had dropped, but she wasn't beyond saving. With urgent care, her chances of survival were good. His heart pounded, a mixture of emotion and responsibility. There was no time for hesitation. Jonas quickly shrugged off his thick ranger jacket, wrapping it around the baby to keep her warm against the lingering chill of the early savannah morning. He pulled her close to his chest, feeling the fluttering breath, a fragile rhythm of life waiting for a lifeline. He was about to call out for help when a sudden realization hit him: the lioness. Jonas lifted his head and looked around. In that moment, a strange emptiness settled over the clearing. The lioness was gone. She had vanished silently, without a sound, without a backward glance. Jonas was stunned. Even as someone who had spent years living in the wild, he couldn't help but be deeply moved. The lioness didn't need thanks. She didn't need an audience. She only needed to make sure the child was safe, and then she quietly withdrew to where she belonged, like a guardian spirit hidden in the wilderness. Jonas gently held the baby closer, eyes fixed on the narrow path where the grass still swayed. It was likely the lioness had just passed through. A strange emotion rose in his chest, as though he had just said goodbye to an old friend, a noble soul he could never quite reach with reason. Not everyone gets the chance to witness the miracles of nature. Rarer still is the chance to feel kindness from a predator. Jonas didn't know why the lioness had done it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe a memory buried deep, something no human could ever fully understand. But one thing he knew for sure: on the darkest night of that child's life, it was she who stood between the baby and death. As he drove back to the conservation station, Jonas occasionally glanced at the sleeping baby cradled in his arms. Outside, the wind still blew, the sun began to rise, and he knew some wild creatures don't just roar, some know how to protect. He whispered in his heart, "Thank you, guardian of the savannah." When Jonas brought the child to the emergency station within the reserve, the medical team immediately sprang into action. A quick check revealed lowered body temperature, dry, cracked skin, and clear signs of dehydration, but the tiny heart was still beating. The baby was rehydrated, warmed, and rushed to the nearest hospital. Everyone waited anxiously, afraid the worst might happen. But miraculously, just a few hours later, the doctors announced the baby was out of danger. Meanwhile, police began investigating the baby's identity. A search operation expanded and, eventually, they found a lead. A young woman was identified as the biological mother. She was a suspect on the run, linked to a criminal network, and had been fleeing through the borderlands near the Serengeti Reserve. According to her testimony, while trying to escape and afraid of being caught, she had abandoned the child in the forest. When Jonas heard the truth, he stood in silence. Part of him flared with anger. How could a mother be so heartless? But that emotion quickly gave way to sorrow. If the lioness hadn't stayed, if she hadn't sat there like a living shield, the child would certainly have died. In that dark night, when the natural instinct of all creatures is survival, a lioness had chosen to protect. News spread quickly, far beyond the boundaries of the reserve. Media outlets ran the story under a moving headline, "The Miracle of the Serengeti." Articles described how a child had been saved not by humans, but by a beast often deemed ferocious. People were astonished. People were touched. And people began to believe in something far greater than reason. The image of the lion sitting silently beside the baby spread rapidly. Some called it maternal instinct. Others named it the guardian angel of the savannah. But Jonas didn't need an explanation. He had been there. He had seen the lion's eyes, not the gaze of a predator, but the eyes of a protector. The child survived. Her biological mother was arrested. And the world began to speak of Serengeti not only as a wild frontier, but as the place where a miracle unfolded, where a fragile life was shielded by the very nature that humans often feared. As for Jonas, every time he patrolled past the tall grass that day, he paused for a moment. He looked at the spot where once, between danger and darkness, a life had been preserved by a lion who never roared, only sat silently as if keeping a promise. The girl was named Hopea, name that brought calm to anyone who heard it. Few remembered the name of her birth mother, but everyone recalled that fateful moment, a baby curled up in the heart of the savannah, guarded not by mankind, but by a lion, the symbol of strength and wild instinct. That very moment reshaped the identity of the Serengeti Reserve. Hope was adopted by a couple who worked in the reserve, a childless pair who had devoted their lives to caring for and studying wildlife. They raised Hope with unconditional love, teaching her to respect every breeze, every canopy of leaves, every trail of paw prints in the forest. She grew up unafraid of nature. Instead, she called it her first friend. As for Jonas, the man who once carried the baby in his arm, she quietly continued his patrols across the endless grasslands. But from that day on, there was something new in his modest office. A simple hand-drawn sketch, framed in rustic wood, hung above his desk. The drawing showed the baby curled up beside the lion under the radiant Serengeti sky. Jonas didn't need a caption beneath it. Every time he looked at it, he was reminded, in this vast wilderness, kindness can come from anywhere, even from souls wrapped in forms that humans once feared. The story of the man and the lion who saved a child gradually became a living legend. At team gatherings, the tale was often retold to new conservation rangers. Around warm campfires in the forest, the story was whispered like a lullaby about a lion who never roared, but silently watched over a fragile life through the night. Hope grew up with that story. Each time she heard others recount it, she smiled, not because she was the main character, but because deep down she knew something miraculous had happened. something that words could never fully explain. That something was love without borders, without conditions, without needing to be understood, only felt deeply by the heart.